Canadian Prepper here. Today we're going to talk about the store shelves, which are emptying at a rapid rate, the prices that are skyrocketing through the roof, and the looming threat of conflict potentially escalating to World War III in the Ukraine. Let's get to it. So due to popular demand, I'm back here talking about current events. Once again, this is not my preference, but apparently it's either the algorithms or your guys' preference. You would much rather hear me share my opinion on my thoughts about what's going on in the world than me actually out there in the field showing practical how-to tips on how to survive this and that, and doing and learning and doing pragmatic things, okay, that are going to actually increase my odds of survival if the shizzy hit the fizzy. That's what I ought to be doing. I ought not to be here telling you how bad things are, okay? We all know things are bad.
We all know you're mad and you don't want to take it anymore.
Right? Okay, we get it. For whatever reason, you just keep coming back to these types of videos, so here it is. Here's some more bad news for you. Invasion threat looms. Ukraine asks for weapons and Canada makes evacuation plans. So I've done a bit more research on this issue, and it would appear on the surface it starts to look like NATO is talking tough, but I am getting the sense, guys, that they're basically saying to the Ukraine that you're on your own. And even Joe Biden was making all these weird comments in the press conference that he just did, talking about how, well, if they just do a little incursion, then it's not too bad. You know, we might not go in there. Basically saying, well, you can do a little, but just don't do a lot, right?
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion, and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc.
And he also said another thing that, yeah, in the long run, a Russian invasion would prevail, but it would come at the expense of many human casualties.
Militarily, they have overwhelming superiority as it relates to Ukraine, but they'll pay a stiff price immediately, near term, medium term, and long term if they do it.
He must.
Aw, come on.
Snap your W-2 and file
Don't
Fed
these
and state
ads,
for
I
free.
hate ads.
Just remember
Damn it.
World War II when he was middle-aged or in his prime or however old he was, where the Soviets were basically making roads out of people. There was that one highway in the Soviet Union where they threw like 1 million guys at it to build this one road. You forget the gulags, you forget the Stalin and all that stuff. Okay, I don't think they're really too worried about the loss of human life if it means getting something. Now, guys, I'm not saying who's good or bad in this equation. We all know that if there were missiles in a country right beside us, say Cuba or Venezuela or something like that, then there would be hell to pay, and it would be DEFCON 1 all over again, all right? And actually, I don't even think we've ever made it to DEFCON 1, thankfully. Right now, we're currently at DEFCON 3. Got a video coming up on that in the future, so stay tuned. But Canada is making evacuation plans. This is getting real, okay? This really escalated from 0 to 100 in a month. Okay, a month ago, nobody was really talking about this. I mean, the Russians have always kind of been dancing around the Ukrainian border, but now it's getting real. There's accusations of sabotage and false flags and all the rest. And we, as a little peasantry, we don't really know what's going on because we're always going to be seeing it from our own media bias perspective. And there's always the possibility that the other side is sending us propaganda, okay? And this is what a lot of people forget, that it wasn't too long ago that the whole, hacker farms and people trying to sow division within our society, other countries trying to do that. And of course, I don't doubt that we're probably doing something similar to the Russians. So we need to keep these things in mind. We need to keep all options open, all possibilities open for what might actually be going on in the world, because the fact of the matter is we just don't know, okay? Now, all we can do, of course, as preppers is keep doing what we have been doing, and that's prepare, prepare, prepare. Now, my sense with this whole NATO backing down thing and this threat of sanctions is that look what they're sending the Ukraine. I mean, they're sending them some anti-tank missiles. They're basically sending them some stuff that they know they're going to get steamrolled through. They know they cannot defeat the Russian army. I mean, come on. That's really like the United States versus Canada and Britain is sending us some rocket launchers or something like that. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious that NATO is saying, look, you guys are on your own. Obviously, because of the whole mutually assured destruction thing. If you don't know what mutually assured destruction is, it's basically, in the instance of World War III, we start volleying missiles back and forth, and ultimately everybody dies. Okay, well, at least that's a theory. There's also a theory that it could be winnable if you have that first strike advantage, and that's why you got these submarines lurking around. You got Russia with nuclear warheads on trains that are moving around 24/7. So guys, this is the real deal. This is probably bound to happen at some point. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime. It's looking like it could happen sooner than later, which would royally suck. Okay, if you want to know how bad a nuclear war would suck, watch the movie Threads. That's pretty much what it would look like, especially if you were in the UK. I mean, that would be a bad place to be. For all my UK viewers, just make sure you have a boat, or make sure that you're at the front end of the channel when the shit goes down, because you don't want to be stuck on that big giant island. Or I could be totally wrong. Maybe that's where you want to be. Maybe it's going to be a Children of Men type situation where, you know, the world is in flames and Britain's the only one that marches on. Who knows? We got another story here. Grocery store closures loom amid labor and product shortages. Grocery stores are struggling with rising labor and product shortages that experts warn could threaten Canada's food security. Okay, so Gary San, Senior Vice President of Public Policy with the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers, says that employee absenteeism due to COVID-19 has hit about 30% across Canada and rising. Without access to rapid testing in many provinces, he says workers are repeatedly forced to isolate for a week after an exposure. Just an exposure, okay, not a confirmed diagnosis. So this is why they're trying to drop these quarantine things, because it is crippling the supply chain. Never mind the whole trucker strike, which is going on right now, which is major and is already causing problems. I went into the grocery store yesterday, and half the produce section was completely empty, and there were notes everywhere that said winter got in the way and our trucks couldn't make it and blah, 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 blah. I've never seen signs like that in a Safeway before in my life. Now, the good news is I went back in there today, all those signs were down, and the produce section was filled up again. But what this should remind you is just how frail the just-in-time delivery system is. When they say just-in-time, they mean just in time. They mean within the last 48 hours. 48 hours is all it takes for a lot of that fresh stuff in the grocery store to either start to go bad, or to be bought, or to not look so good, not look so appetizing. And that's just the produce section of the store, okay? Those grocery stores are getting cycled out on a daily basis, if not every 72 hours. So if you don't think that we are dangling by threads in our society, and that one little teeny weeny little domino pushing another domino over that's bigger than it, and that one pushing a domino over that's bigger than it, if you don't think that can trigger a collapse in relatively short order by now, then my friend, I don't know what you are smoking, but I'm sure that it's the same stuff that my communist cameraman is smoking. In fact, you know what? We're going to take a brief break. I want to show you guys a video that Guy McPherson, love him or hate him, okay, we've had him on the channel before. He's the guy that thinks that the world is basically going to go extinct in 5 years. I think he's got 5 years left on his prediction. Judging by the way things have been going in the last few years, I would say that there's an argument to be made, but definitely too much of an aggressive timeline. But he shared a video on his channel that was all about the exponential function of dominoes falling, to show how one little thing within a network can trigger a massive collapse in a relatively short period of time. And this is also relevant to the mutually assured destruction thing, because so what happens? There's some kind of skirmish on the Ukraine-Russian border. Russia goes in there. Maybe someone from NATO gets killed. Maybe NATO, in some way, shape, or form, responds in a little way. And then Russia responds in a way which is just a bit more aggressive than that. Then NATO responds in a way which is a bit more aggressive than that. And so on and so on and so on and so forth, until we're hurtling hypersonic missiles at each other from across the pond. And quite frankly, That's not going to last too long with the speed of these missiles nowadays, even though they say they haven't created them yet. But, I mean, if they created them, we're going to be the last people to know. And it's going to come in the form of a mushroom cloud, unfortunately. So I want you guys to watch this video because I think it's an analogy for the climate chaos, the supply chain, and the escalating tensions around the world. So check it out.
Everybody knows about playing with dominoes, but what you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino, which is about 1.5 times larger. So what I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. And the smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high and 1 millimeter thick. And I will carefully place it. And there are 13 dominoes. And the largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds and is more than 1 meter tall. Ready? Boom. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building.
If you pretend to be something long enough,
So you see what I mean now? In a complicated system, this complicated globalized web that we've woven, all it takes is one little bottleneck to create a problem, which creates a bigger problem, which creates a bigger problem. And it's actually much like the golden ratio. The golden ratio is 1.6 times the previous number, okay? The Fibonacci sequence is very much like that. It's the exponential function, okay? Once one thing collapses, the whole thing can collapse relatively easy if we don't stop those dominoes from progressing. Now, speaking of things getting out of hand, here's another interesting story. Orange crop is set to be the smallest since World War II, sending OJ prices surging almost 50% in the last few months and 5% one day alone. 50%. So remember, when they're talking about 7% inflation, they're not talking about the commodities and the things that you need to pay for on a monthly basis. Maybe they're talking about television sets or video game systems, which are largely offset by technological deflation. The cost to make those things gets reduced and reduced, even though the price of chips now is kind of counterbalancing that. But they're not talking about your grocery bill, which is going up 50%. They're not talking about your rent, which is going up, or the cost of everything. Used cars, whatever the case might be, all this stuff is going up, okay? So citrus disease and bad weather are constraining supply of oranges in the United States and internationally. Meanwhile, the demand for orange juice, which has been sliding for years, got a bump during the you-know-what, because, of course, everybody wants their vitamin C, right? This has sent orange juice prices higher during the pandemic and will probably continue to climb. Frozen orange juice futures have surged more than 50% during the pandemic, and they rose to a 2-year high last week, soaring 5% alone on Thursday. So this is just one example. We've seen this happen with all sorts of commodities. They're talking about a disease here. I personally think that that's probably one of the next dominoes that is going to fall in this whole equation, is going to be some kind of blight on the food supply. I think that was the plot in the movie Interstellar. A blight basically killed off all the plants on the planet. What do we got going on here? CNN, be quiet. We don't want to listen to you. So as we continue to do battle with nature, we can expect for prices to continue to rise, never mind the supply chain and whether or not we can hire the truckers or we can make robot truckers that are going to get our food to us. The question is going to be, can we even get food at all if these climate dominoes continue to fall? We know that the bee population has basically been halved at its historic highs due to pesticide use and a variety of other things. God only knows what the chemicals are doing to us. Are the chemicals going to make us infertile, and is that going to be nature's way of balancing us out? Does nature play 4D chess like that? I don't know, guys, but we do know that 2022 will be the beginning of the end of widespread global scarcity, okay? So we're seeing an energy shortfall in the EU, currently translated into a significant shortfall in its natural gas inventories and a record high energy prices. Just the opening act of the scarcity economy, all right? What this also means is that if these sanctions were imposed on Russia, which some countries don't want to do, it's going to lead to a lot of problems in the EU in terms of price hikes. And when you have those kind of rapid price hikes, you're going to see it translate into people who are not so happy with the current government's policies. That could potentially lead to civil unrest and yada, yada, yada. The dominoes continue to fall, right? By the middle of next year, we will observe a supply gap in the oil supply and demand balance. High natural gas prices are leading to a shortfall in fertilizer production, which threatens global food supplies starting next year, aka, I'm not sure if they're referring to this year or next year. It is an example of what they call knock-on effects. Scarcity of other base materials such as metals as well as energy is set to trigger a global supply shortfall in many manufactured goods for the first time since the end of World War II. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. Inflation will continue to rise and be sustained. Monetary policymakers will continue to cope. Yeah, I'm sure they're really going to have to cope sitting on their large paychecks. We all know who's going to have to cope. It's going to be the people who are forced to choose between feeding themselves or having a place to live, essentially. So I'm going to post links to these articles in the description section below, guys. I think we're going to start a more regular current events based channel. In fact, you know what? Maybe we're going to call it the Prepper News. Actually, maybe I'm going to get a website called thepreppernews.com. Maybe I'll have to make sure that some prick doesn't go and buy the domain just like CanadianPrepper.com. You know who you are, you little scoundrel, and try to sell it to me for thousands and thousands of dollars. Maybe I should just go and scoop thepreppernews.com before one of those greedy little buggers gets their hands on it. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I already did. Yeah, preppernews.com, guys. Stay tuned because we want to document the end. I mean, look, if the end is nigh, I want to be there with you guys right to the end, documenting the whole thing from the top of a mountain in Yellowstone Park. If that's what it comes to, okay, then that's what we're going to do. We got to keep our sanity somehow. I know I facetiously talk about some of these issues and I make light of certain things, and to be honest, it's a bit of a coping strategy at this point, because when you ingest as much information as I do, you have to have a sense of humor. I mean, you have to understand that these short lives that we lead, I don't believe this is the end. I believe that there's a greater force of which we are a part, and our little brains on this big rock, and you know, these organic meat suits that we wear, this is just it's just a ride, okay? As one of my favorite comedians, Bill Hicks, would say, it's just a ride, but while on this ride, make sure you're prepared, because the last thing you want is undue suffering for you, your friends, and your family. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.